Evan Powell, founder of Reprise. Did I say that right?
Yes, Reprise. Yeah, although both Reprise and Reprise are both okay ways to say it.
All right, I'm already getting educated all the way from Boston, man. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How the heck are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So you're gonna have to back this up, man. Reprise is the only enterprise class demo creation platform that delivers both interactive product tours and live demos to its users. Nobody else does that.
Not at the level that we do. No, we were the first in the industry, and we've continued to lead the way in terms of the broad array of technology we have. I mean, essentially what we're doing is putting the demo, which when you think about it, if you sell software, it is the most important part of your software sales is the actual thing that you're selling and how you show it to people. And we are putting the power to control that in the hands of go-to-market teams, whether it's putting a demo on your website, having a perfectly tailored live demo environment that's highly interactive, or even being able to have just a quick on the fly, you know what, I'm giving a demo to Wes right now and I'd want to put Wes's name in for everybody else's, and I want to do that right before I get started. That's what we're about. We're about helping to provide a custom tailored buying experience to your buyers so that you're selling the way that they actually want to purchase a product.
No way, man. My marketing department, they gave me this demo. They gave me this deck. I'm going to do the entire deck. You're going to have to watch it whether you like it or not. Okay.
Exactly. Hey, look, I came up through sales and I have been that person before. And it's not great, right? And the fact is, frankly, if your marketing department actually did give you material to demo, you might be a step ahead of a lot of people we see who are just taking whatever they get from their engineering team, or worse, demoing customer data.
Yeah.
And that happens more often than you'd think, and at larger companies than you'd think as well.
Oh, I know. It's ugly. So I want to get into that a little bit. I may just have you demo it on the CRM Sushi podcast. Because this is as much, the sales podcast is more geared towards you, right? Like what led you to this? What were the obstacles you overcame? I'm checking you out, on LinkedIn, got some good education background. Were you in Texas? You working for Dow Chemical?
I was in Texas very briefly for
in Midland? Midland, Michigan.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was in Midland, Michigan, but then I was also in Houston, Texas and Freeport, Texas for like a 2-month project for a little while. But
so I went to high school in Houston, but I saw Midland. I'm like, man, you were out in West Texas? Damn.
Oh, no. I managed to avoid getting quite that far out in the middle of nowhere. Sorry to
good for you.
Midland. But no, my background was it actually, my sales background started before I graduated from school. And I should point out generally, right? I think when I go through my background, I'm always conscious to acknowledge that there was a lot of luck involved. And so don't get me wrong, I did hard work and all those kinds of things, but I was in a good place and was able to take advantage of those things. And it started out when I was in college. I was actually singing in an a cappella group called the Tufts Beelzebubs. And I decided to manage the group my junior year. It'd be a fun, get elected to be the business manager. You negotiate the contracts for the gigs, that kind of thing. And while I was doing that, we got a call from the TV show Glee asking us to record tracks for them. And so I wound up, I joined as sort of a thing I would do, in my time when I wasn't in class, wound up negotiating 11 contracts for performances on Glee. And that was when I realized, hey, I really like doing this. I like working with customers, negotiating contracts, seeing that come to fruition, watching the numbers tick up in the bank account as we get more things executed, that kind of thing. And so I started looking for sales jobs. And that was where I wound up at Dow Chemical. They had a sales training program where I did a couple months in a classroom, and then was out selling plastic for food packaging manufacturers of all things. So at one point I sold most of the plastic that sticks the Chobani yogurt lids to the cup. That was me, my claim to fame. I sold at one point most of the envelope windows in the United States, which you think you get a bill and it's got the clear envelope window in it. That was me for a while, and realized I wanted to do tech instead. that it was fun. I'd gotten a good education, but like that, I wanted to be part of something more innovative in the long run. And so started looking for opportunities in technology. My girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, was interning at a venture fund. And so I connected with some people there who put me in touch with Insight Squared, which was a startup here in Boston, got acquired last year. They had an incredible sales education by virtue of what they were selling. We were selling sales analytics. And so the way that we sold that product was we would plug into someone's Salesforce, pull up all these advanced analyses, and then tell them what they didn't know about their business, and then say, hey, don't you want to know this stuff too? And that, I mean, the opportunity to basically look at, I think I counted before I left, over 500 different sales organizations in the time that I was there, and actually understand how they worked was invaluable. And ended up, but before I left, I was managing a team. And I really only left to go to business school. I had the opportunity to go to school at MIT for 2 years, and wanted to, at the time, I thought I wanted to do venture capital. So was looking at ways I could go and invest in startups. And then it's a funny story really, because I saw an opportunity to take a class that was taught by one of the founders of Insight Squared, who I'd known previously. So I go and I take Sam's class, and I'm meeting with Sam after class. I'm saying, yeah, I'm looking going into venture. I want to do all these things. He's like, Evan, that is, I'm sure you could do that if you wanted to, but you should go start a company. And I'm like, Sam, that's really flattering. Like, that's really nice of you to say, but I can't code. I don't have an idea. I don't know if it makes sense. Later that day, I get a LinkedIn message from one of our mutual friends who had also founded Insight Squared, Brian, saying, hey, I was talking to Sam. I have this idea. Do you want to talk? And that was the idea for Reprise. He'd been working, he's technically brilliant. And he'd been working at a company here in Boston and said, you know what? I'm realizing that every company I've ever been at as an engineer, I hate building demo environments because it's a ton of work. I spend a ton of money doing it, and the sales team hates it in the end. And it's like, well, it's funny because I've been the salesperson that's hated that demo environment, and I've had the demo go out on the call with someone's CEO, and I've had it not show the thing it wants to show. So like, I saw the value from sales. And I said to him, that's great, but I kind of told my wife that after grad school, we wouldn't be, doing the ramen noodles thing. I'd go get a salary. So like, why don't I go and do market research and see if this is something people might want? And if it makes sense in 6 months, I'll come back to you. 3 weeks later, I was back to him and saying like, let's go do this. And it was because everybody I met with in sales said like, I had that problem last week, right? And I'm sure a bunch of people listening to this podcast in sales are sitting there thinking, yeah, you know what? I remember when I got a 404 error in the middle of my demo. Or I remember when someone said, you know what, can you show me a company that looks a little bit more like me? Because this doesn't really look like what I'd be doing. And you're like, just imagine it, because I don't have that environment, right? And that was just sort of universal with every meeting that I had. People were asking for access, and things have kind of snowballed from there. We've grown a ton in the past 3 years. We're a leader in the category. We were the first to come out with this kind of thing, and we're really working with large scale enterprises to deploy serious demo environments.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the space is. Like I've sold CRMs for 15 plus years, and usually in the smaller entities. And so like I haven't had that problem selling smaller platforms because usually I can just I have them walk me through their ideal world, and then I build it for them as they watch, right? Just to prove how easy it is. But yeah, if you've got a complex environment, I sold telecom test equipment for years as well. And you had to simulate the traffic to prove that a switch could work and things like that. So that's kind of your world, right?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe some of the things that we've heard that the contortions that people have bent themselves into to get like, we've talked to security companies who have said, yeah, we set up a server and we shoot attacks at it, and that fills our demo environment. Imagine that getting out of the lab, right? Or I had someone say, oh, no, my demo is really easy. They did appointment setting software for doctor's offices. They're like, yeah, so every day I get 20 texts asking me to confirm my fake doctor's appointments, and I just have to respond to all of them, and then it's fine. I mean, if I forget, my salespeople don't have a demo the next day, but so long as I remember, it's fine. And it's like, it's that kind of stuff writ large. I mean, companies that are like, yeah, we couldn't figure out how to do a demo environment, so I just demo our own instance. but it's kind of a problem because I accidentally demoed that I gave a discount to somebody last week.
Mm-hmm.
It's all of those kinds of things. So when you ask about the market, I mean, effectively, we can work with anyone who has software that loads in a browser.
Sure.
But the folks that are seeing a ton are the folks that have, we've got banks, we've got fast food companies, we've got rideshare companies, we've got anything that involves interactivity, involves adding data or large amounts of data, or just people that sell to multiple industries, right? Like even if you can create a demo environment, you generally don't want to create more than one because you want your engineers to be making new things. But if I'm a salesperson and I've got to sell to a healthcare company one day, a financial company, a services company the next day, and a CPG company the day after that, I want different demos for each of those because my healthcare demo is not going to resonate with the CPG company at all. And that's kind of what we're trying to do is to put that power in the hands of go-to-market teams so that they can create that custom experience for their buyers.
So in other words, you're saying you need it to be so easy to use, even a knuckle-dragging salesman can use it.
Well,
I know that's what you're saying, man.
Hey, I came from sales, and I generally throughout my career and continue to resent that implication when people talk about it. So I think salespeople have to be some of the smartest folks, especially on an EQ level that you'll meet. But we want it to be usable. And actually, what we've done, we have an array of products, right? So some are designed more for the salesperson to use and make quick changes on the fly. Like I'm about to give this. Some are designed for like a sales engineering team to create a really in-depth interactive environment that does crazy stuff. And if you think those products kind of align along the sales funnel, right? So we have something that focuses on a live tour that goes on your website. That's for the marketing team. They can go and create a demo that someone clicks through and then says, yes, I'd like to talk to somebody in sales. Then we have something for the salesperson to give the live demo. And then we have that even deeper level of, my sales engineer is going to show how this crazy thing works. But they're not going to have to take 3 weeks to code something because it's already done in this environment.
Yeah. So you started 3 years ago this month.
Yeah.
You had a buddy, right? So he's the techie and you're the sales biz dev guy.
Yeah, there's actually 3 of us. So actually the bit of the story I didn't mention was that professor who connected Brian and I, we went back to him to talk about raising money, and he joined as well, Sam. And he's also one of our co-founders. And so he's got a product bent and is our CEO. And then, he and Brian are co-CEOs. And then Brian does the technology, and then I do whatever we got to do. Whether it's sales, I'm jumping on a sales call actually right after this, or making sure that the payroll system works properly. That's me.
Yeah. So the 3 of you team up. How long did it to make your first sale?
That's a great question. We first started talking in like October of 19. We incorporated at the start of 2020. We raised a seed round in May of 2020, and then in July we signed our first customer, Pendo. We'd known the CMO there, Joe Turnoff, great guy. We'd known him for a long time. But it was really funny because we do live demos, and that was our initial thought was we're selling live demos. So we went and gave a demo to Joe and said, can we meet your salesperson to talk about doing demos live on a call? And he goes, yeah, I'll definitely introduce you to our salesperson, but could I put this on my website? And that was when we realized there was this whole other world in addition to our main focus of sales demos of marketers that want to put the product on their site but have trouble doing it.
What do you mean put it on their site? So like a customer or prospect could just set up their own demo?
Yeah, so it's a guided tour of the product that looks and feels like the real thing, but it's not connected to anything. So if you look, and we have a whole list of examples of these that our customers have made on our website where you can click in and it'll guide you through. It'll say, hey, welcome to Pendo. Click over here. Like Pendo actually has a whole demo library where you come to their site and you say, I'm interested in product analytics. Great, here's our tour of product analytics, and it walks you through the product. That can be really difficult to do without something like Reprise because you would need a working product connected to a back end. It's got to wipe every time someone comes to the site new again or something like that. We can basically make it right there for you. So that's one of our products is those product tours, and that's where we started with Pendo. But we focus a lot on that live demo experience because the whole goal of those product tours is to get you on the phone with a salesperson to give an in-depth interactive demo with them. And that's where we put a ton of our time and energy.
So y'all are you raised money, but was your buddy coding in the meantime?
Yeah.
Because I mean, 60 days from money to sale. I mean, it's fine that you got a buddy, but it's like, doesn't mean I'm going to be your customer.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
because I like you. I'll go drink a beer with you. You know, what did you have to show? And what was he buying? Was it like a very stripped down? Was it a beta version? Was it alpha? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Brian, I mean, I mentioned before, Brian's brilliant. He'd been coding for a while. Even before he and I started talking, he'd done some basic things. And yeah, I mean, those early days was Brian coding in his basement, and I was taking sales calls from study rooms at MIT because I was still in school when we started. That early version of the product, the real magic was being able to say, like, here, give me a login to your product. Great, thanks, I'm logged in. Click. Hey, I've just copied your entire product. Here it is. And watch as I edit it, and watch as I change this name. And oh, I'm going to take the name Joe and make it Wes everywhere. And I'm going to, do all, and we could do that in a few seconds. Right. And that was the initial magic that really got people on board.
Mhm.
Now, we're evolving even further beyond that, right? It's interactivity. It's, hey, Wes's name isn't on the screen yet, but when it does appear later, that's going to change. Or how do we look and help identify any personal information that you have and what you captured to make sure that that's automatically anonymized for you? All of those kinds of things are where we're focusing. And then looking at ways to integrate even further. How do I make sure that demo goes back into Salesforce so you can tie which demos win and which screens help you win deals, all those kinds of things.
So that first customer, because I see on LinkedIn, they're mentioned.
Yeah.
So like when you start something new, do you just tell them, hey, you're going to be our first customer, and just hook them up with a sweetheart grandfather deal? Or is it like kind of stroke the ego, say, hey, yeah, I know it's early, but you're going to be seen as cutting edge, bleeding edge. You can say you were there at the beginning. And so they
Yeah.
can kind of, 'cause people take a risk. The risk reward has to balance out, right? It's got to come out in their favor. Was this just a low risk, for somebody to jump into? And so it's like, all right, no big deal. It's demo software. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You're not affecting our live environment. How do you get those first few people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's a few things, right? One, the core concept has to be compelling, and I can't overstate how much that helped us in the early days. Was one, that first look is magical, and oh my gosh, I've needed something like this for forever. Was very helpful. There was that pull. In the case of Pendo, they actually had an active project to put the product on their website, and they weren't sure how they were going to solve it. They've been looking at, design solutions and things like that, or trying to actually put a live environment up, and those hadn't worked. And so they were looking, we happened to be there at the right time. And there's also a degree of trust that you have to build, right? Like, we need, and it helped that we knew someone there before. And usually, in a startup, that's going to be your initial prospecting calls are the folks that'll take a call with you, even though they've never heard your company name before. And it's probably because they've heard your name. And that was sort of the initial piece of saying, like, look, you're going to have a ton of ability to influence the way this product works as well, right? Like, what Pendo needs early is going to help us, figure out how we develop the product that works for them. And you're going to have direct attention, right? Like, who was the first, customer success manager for Pendo? I was, right? Like, who was the first support person? My co-founder, Brian, right? Like, they had access to us right there. And it's important that you provide that kind of support to your customers early on, and show them that, like, no, you almost don't want to refer to them as customers at that stage. Like, we thought of them as a launch partner, right? Like, they were helping us develop a product, and in return, they were going to get the product that they'd always wanted.
Yeah, that being able to shape it and massage it, you kind of stroke their ego in a way, right? Because if they're techie, then they're going to like that bleeding edge. And I had customers like that back when I sold tech, because I sold for a startup, and a tried and true type, they're like, come back later.
Right.
My biggest customer was a younger guy, former military, wanting to make a name for himself, and saw the value and was willing to take a risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the whole sort of crossing the chasm paradigm from that book. I mean, it's this idea that you want to find the folks that are most excited to do new things, right?
Yeah.
Like Pendo is a company that is at the forefront of what they do, and they want to stay that way. And so they're
Yeah.
looking for ways to stay ahead. That's the kind of
Right.
company you want to be talking to.
So, had you ever raised money before? Was that your first experience doing that?
I had never raised money before. My co-founders had. I had, however, spent some time as a graduate school intern at a couple of venture funds. So I had been on the other side of a couple of transactions, which was helpful. Just kind of knowing, what the conversations were, and actually, Glasswing Ventures, where I had been a graduate intern, they were a co-lead in our seed round and have participated in every round since. So that was especially, nice to be able to talk to folks that I knew and know that it was a solid fund that was backing us. So that helped with the experience, but it was my first time ever raising. Yeah.
How does somebody decide whether to, bootstrap it, family and friends, or go, the venture route?
Oof. That is it's a really good question. And it's one that, if I'm being like, most of my experience in startups has been in venture-backed companies. So I kind of know what that flow is like from both sides. Both on the investing and the operating side. But I think it comes down to, if it were me and I were looking at it again and trying to decide, I'd be looking at, all right, what's going on in the market for this thing? Is it the kind of thing that has a slow burn, or do I think it's about to take off? And in the case of demos and what we saw at Reprise, everybody I talked to, right? Like, you go into these meetings and you kind of expect, I was meeting with folks in my network saying, what do you think of this idea? And you kind of expect that people are going to be nice about your startup idea. Your friends are going to be nice to you, right? They'll be like, oh, cool, like, good luck, and like that was that. But when I went into all these meetings and everyone was like, how do I buy this? How do I get it? That was clear that there was demand for it. And when there's that kind of a response, if you don't get there, someone else will. And if you think you're in that sort of environment, that's where venture money makes the most sense. Right? Because it's giving you the tools to jumpstart the business.
So why is that? I would think it'd be the other way around. If people are clamoring for it,
yeah,
then it's like, hell, I'll put this on my credit card because I'm gonna go make some sales right away. I don't have to give up any equity.
I see that approach, but what I'd say is, but then at that point, if it's that good an idea, you're in a race against time. And when you're bootstrapping, you've got yourself and one engineer, maybe your co-founder, right? And what we needed, if we were really going to take advantage of the market, was a team of engineers. Because if we didn't, someone else would go and raise the money and get a team of engineers, and then they'd have a product more advanced than us faster.
Yeah.
Right. And so my point of view is, like, if you're in something that's a race, it's like an execution race, which we felt like this market was going to be. Venture money is fuel for that. If you're in something where it's more R&D driven, or you think you need to do some, you need to generate virality, like a lot of the product-led growth plays are better for bootstrapping, because you just sort of need people to use it and then tell their friends and those kinds of things. May make more sense.
So I see you're starting to win some awards. How does that work? Do you have to submit your platform to these bodies? Is it word of mouth? I hate to say it, but I mean, is it pay to play?
Yeah, I mean, you've frozen there.
I'm like, what's the catch? Oh yeah, just get a booth. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. So because like right now, how do you say it? NEVI, NEVY?
The New England Venture Capital Association. They have an award system called the NEVI. So I mean, it varies from award to award, right? The NEVI we're super proud of. That was actually one that it's a venture capital association. So investors in New England submit their portfolio companies as being exciting.
Gotcha.
Glasswing submitted us, and I am very thankful to them for that. And yeah, we won that award. I unfortunately had COVID that night and couldn't get to the ceremony, but Brian was there. Some of them come to us, say, hey, I've heard about you. Some of them, yeah, it's associated with, we were at a conference and all the folks at the conference were eligible or things like that. So it really varies award to award, but the NEVI is one we are particularly proud of. We're nominated as an exciting company within the portfolio of one of our investors, and then the rest of the association agreed, and that was really awesome.
How do you think those awards help or not? I mean, do people care? Or is it like, yeah, fine, I'm still going to try it and put you through your paces?
Yeah,
like if something's new, like a bleeding edge person, they don't care, right? They don't care. Actually, they're happy that they want to say, hey, I found you before anybody else.
Exactly.
Like, does that move the needle? Have you found?
So, I mean, this is you're sort of asking one of the most difficult questions in marketing, which is like how much marketing attribution are you able to do to these particular things that happen in the ether? Do you know for sure that brought someone to you?
Right.
So like I don't have data. I'd love to. I love data. It makes life much better. But I don't have data on it. What I can tell you is, no one's come to me and said, I bought you because you are part of the New England Venture Capital Association. I'm sorry. Someone just entered my apartment from the outside door. Let me just make sure everything's good. I will be right back.
So Evan single-handedly destroyed a Hell's Angels gang that was coming into his apartment, but he's back. He's back to resume. Didn't even mess up his hair. I mean, he's just
not
a man of many talents. All right, so where were we?
we were talking about awards and what they do for you and those kinds of things. I mean, look, like, no one has come to me and said like, well, I wasn't sure if I was going to buy Reprise, but then I saw that you won that particular award and I did. But I think, what can be tough to remember is that like we're a 3-year-old company. We've got 50 folks. We are trying to get our name out there as much as possible, even in a space where as soon as people hear about us, they're excited. I need them to hear about us.
Hey, yeah. If nothing else, it's press and maybe like I don't know what that award is, right? And I don't really care, but it is some validation and it makes me click and start diving in.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's cool. So you're up to 50 people. How I mean, good grief. So you started this COVID was rising up before we all knew it.
Yeah.
And now you're like, well, that's interesting too. So, I mean, COVID was full blown and you get some company willing to give you a chunk of change. Well, I guess it was tech was like blowing up then. Were they like super optimistic at that point?
It's almost hard to remember kind of the ups and downs. So like we incorporated in January of 2020, but the 3 of us as co-founders really said we were doing this full time in March of 2020. Like the first week of March, I had pulled out all my job interviews coming out of grad school and my co-founders had left their jobs. And then a week later, the whole world shuts down.
Yeah.
And there was definitely a like, oh my God, like what did we just do moment.
Right.
And so there was some uncertainty there. And it was a little, it then shook out into a large tech boom, which we're now sort of seeing the other side of right now.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not as easy out there as it was. But there was a definite moment of uncertainty. And I remember calling one investor at the time who I'd been sort of talking to a little bit about this and sort of they thought I was calling for advice. They're saying, oh, lay low until we figure out what's going on. And I was like, well, actually, I've got a term sheet and I was wondering if you wanted to be involved, right? And that was sort of how confused, like some people were saying like, let's hunker down. Other people were saying, nope, this is the opportunity to make some money. Things are going to change. There's going to be more reliance on tech. And so there was a lot of confusion. But this again goes back to like our seed investors were Accomplice who had invested in Insight Squared. That was actually, I mentioned my girlfriend, now wife, was interning at a VC. That was that fund. And then Glasswing, where I had worked, it was the fact that we had those relationships and had already shown them, here is the vision, and they continued to believe and move forward with us. But yeah, it would have been tough for us if they hadn't done that. And by the way, that's why when I point out, right, like, as much as we've done a ton of hard work, it was also very fortunate that we had those connections and knew those people.
Sure.
And it's something that I don't want to just take for granted.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how is your staff dispersed? Are most
Yeah.
people virtual, or most like overseas developers? Like, how are you growing this?
We are US based, but fully remote. And it actually solved kind of a problem for us. So Sam, my co-founder, lives in Rhode Island. My other co-founder, Brian, lives in Philly, and I'm here in Boston. So there was already okay, where would we put an office if we did that? Would it be, and the COVID situation kind of resolved that for us. We said, we'll be all remote forever.
Yeah.
And that has been a huge benefit to us in hiring people, in hiring the best people, and hiring a diverse array of people. We put out a job posting and we're looking for the best person in the US, not the best person within a 5-mile radius of our office or whatever it is. Right?
Yeah.
We've really leaned into that as a company.
Do y'all try to get together like quarterly or semi-annually or anything like that to build some culture?
We have an annual full company meetup. We just did that in New York City back in October, which was a ton of fun. We rented out a movie theater, did some meeting stuff there. We did a scavenger hunt across the city, all that kind of thing. And then different teams will get together on a more regular basis. So actually our engineering and product team is coming to Boston this week. In a couple of weeks, our sales and marketing teams are going to Nashville. So yeah, we do try to get together in person on a semi-regular basis. But we've put a lot of systems in place and are always looking at ways to improve on being a really functional remote workplace that allows people to have less of like a work-life balance and more of a work-life kind of symbiosis, right? You have an entire life, some of it is being at work.
Yeah, sure.
And that's kind of what we focus on with our employees here.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you've hit critical mass? Like, do things like start to become like have its own momentum, or is it still, do you feel like you're kind of like pushing uphill? Well, I guess, you probably never were. Based on what you're telling me, it was almost like the market was pulling you, like, please give us your product.
Yeah. And that is, again, something I don't want to take for granted, but yes, we there's always been a lot of market pull, but that doesn't mean it doesn't feel like you're pushing uphill a lot of days, right? Like the folks here work hard. And are incredibly talented, and it takes effort to build a company.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't do everything right. And it's important to recognize those things and figure out how we improve and all of those kinds of things as well. And so that I don't, you're sort of asking like, oh, have you reached critical mass? I'm sitting there thinking like, well, what's critical mass, right? Like, what's the point at which, like, I feel like there's going to be a space. At the beginning we were trying to create a category. I think we've done that. That's great, right? Like, the analyst sites, G2, all these, they're getting ready to put out that there's a category, and that's fantastic. But does that mean that we're going to win? No. It just changes the nature of the game.
So was there literally no demo type software? I mean, were you a category of one at first?
Yeah, we were the first out there, and like I said, a bunch of I think there's now probably 20 that have followed us. But at this point, it's almost every time a new one pops up, it's almost kind of more validation that we're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That people kind of want to come and do the same thing. But yeah, no, there was no. I mean, there was video software. You could do screenshots. You could make PowerPoint decks. But the idea of like actually taking the interface of your software and making it function, that was new.
Are the new guys, I mean, any of them playing dirty pool coming after you?
Look, every market I've ever been in sales, there's those one or two competitors that you're like, come on, we'd never do that. And they're definitely out there. I'm not going to name names because I wouldn't do that. But they're out there for sure. I think it's always something that's rankled with me because I growing up I was like a soccer referee. Like I like to see things on the straight and narrow. And so when I see that kind of stuff, it bothers me because it's just not how I do business. But yeah, it's out there. I'm sure you can I'm sure you can Google and find stuff from our competitors about us. It's just not how we roll.
Yep. Well, and over the years, I've been a reseller, right? Not an employee, but I've gotten close with several companies, and I would always do a fair analysis, the Pepsi challenge, right? Us versus them. But there were one or two that would and I'd run across them, I would do a Google search, right? Just to see what's popping up. And you see these crappy ads, shooting at them. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I had like a 3,000 word blog post years ago against one of them. And the CEO found it of the other company running the crappy ads, right? And he emails me, and this whole, us versus them, his reply to my post, he's like, yeah, you probably won't post any of this. So I screenshotted that, I'm like, oh, this guy does not know me, and it just became this epic thing. I had my original, then I had his reply, then I had, in a different color than my reply to his reply in another color. Just, dude, you should not have done that.
Yeah, I don't, our approach to this kind of stuff when we see it is to try to take the high road and just keep being I'm
just saying, are you
fix the chase?
Just for those listening that maybe you're starting something and they're getting some cheap shots from them. Because look, when you're an up and comer, I mean, you got to take shots at the guys above, and maybe not. It doesn't have to be dirty shots, but it does have to be, take Tesla. I don't know. You're new. Like, hey, here's how we compare to a Ford. Here's how we compare to a Mercedes. I mean, because if you're new, you got to compare yourself to something. So just, how do you handle, the dirty pool if it comes up?
I mean, I think, look, right, obviously there's a degree to which, if the dirty pool is so dirty that it's defamatory, you have a route. Right. But
that's obvious. Yeah. You can go kick their ass, but they asked for that.
But in general, I think it's the kind of thing where, I find, once, for example, when I think buyers see this stuff. And the example I'm going to give is when I was at Dow Chemical, I was on the team of salespeople helping to evaluate a new CRM. And I'm not going to name names of who was who here, but you can probably figure it out. A CRM that everyone has heard of and most people probably use came into the office and they gave their demo. And they just showed what they did and how it would have helped our use case. Then another CRM that was one of their largest competitors came into the office. They did their demo, they showed what they did, and then they'd say, oh, and those guys over there at company A probably told you this, that, and the other. And they did that probably 5, 6, 7 times throughout this presentation. And every time they did it, I was like, they're scared of those guys. That's why they're doing this, because that company came in and they didn't say a thing about anybody else. They just showed what they had. And if you are someone who's an up and comer chasing a market leader, I'd be really wary of that, because buyers can tell when you're scared.
Oh yeah.
I'd say some of the folks doing that kind of thing, they're doing us more of a service by being afraid of us than they are themselves by trying to take a shot. And if you're someone who feels like you're in a position where you have to take a shot, figure out how to do it in a way that, makes you look better rather than worse.
Yeah. You had some sales, some unofficial, official sales experience, but I mean, you weren't trained in college in the acapella group, but you go to Dow. Did Dow have good, do you feel like you got a good foundation in sales so you could carry this forward?
Yeah, they had, I don't know if they still have that program. I've not kept in as close touch, but they had a program at the time that was 6 months of paid in the classroom learning. Everything from how to run a sales meeting down to, they had a fashion consultant come in and tell us how to dress, which you wouldn't know looking at me now, but they took us out to a dinner.
Hey, are you saying something? What? Hey, we're all working from home, man. It's a different time.
Exactly. It's very, I still wore a suit to the office back then. But no, I mean, it was a sales finishing school. It was, and that was why above all else I took the job, because those programs don't really exist these days. And so that was just an incredible experience, and really, kicked off my sales career. And that was, I credit that with, a lot of folks, and I have a ton of respect for folks who start out as like BDRs, SDRs, starting out in a cold calling role and then work their way up. Those are some of the grittiest people you will ever meet. That experience of having that sort of finishing school, I think, is the reason why I was able to get into tech sales without doing one of those cold calling jobs, which is good, because I got to tell you, I might have washed out. And I say this to BDRs all the time. I'm like, look, I'm good at a lot of things. That particular skill set is not my top. And so I have a ton of respect for BDRs who did it. But that was kind of how I managed to work up the sales ladder in tech without doing that job.
Yeah, very cool. Nice, man. Well, we're going to have you demo your software on the CRM Sushi podcast, but I appreciate you taking the time, kind of sharing the ins and outs, the lessons learned of launching, because I'm going through this a little bit myself, trying to launch create a very small, lightweight little CRM. I bought the URL, the pre-CRM. So very lightweight, and man, I don't have a partner. I'm trying to get my son, right? He's got a computer science degree. He kind of knows what to do, but he's just busy with his own job. And it can be hard.
Definitely.
And, so it sounds like you had the right mix, and, I'm just always trying to encourage my listeners, to follow their dream. The guest I had on before you, Lori, she started the first American, the woman-owned bourbon company.
Really?
She had no experience. She just wanted to do it. And I'm like, damn, all right. And so, if you got an idea, it's like, get after it. And it might be hard, but fine. If you got that itch, you got to scratch it, don't bury it. Because too many people, man, they go to their graves with, the song still in them. And it's like, get after it. So, kudos to you for, instead of 6 months, just doing 3 weeks and like saying, all right, this is the way to go.
Well, thank you. Look, I think it's the sort of thing where, like I said, the stars aligned in a lot of ways. And,
but you listened, man. You went out to do your research, and, you didn't need overwhelming evidence. Well, you got it. You got it very quickly, and you recognize this is overwhelming evidence. I don't need 5 months and a week more. So, good on you for recognizing it.
It's been quite a ride for sure. And a fun one.
So I'm linking to your site. So you got a demo. Where did I put it? So I hope I say it right. Reprise?
Yes, Reprise.
I want to say Reprise, but you're educated.
Like I said, we'll do either.
And I want to make sure my listeners, that come from the Knuckle Dragon sales school that I went to, REPRISE, reprise.com, and then /customer-demos. But, worst case, if you're driving right now, just remember reprise.com. Go find the demos, check it out, and stay tuned for, we'll dive in to see how your software works on the CRM Sushi podcast, and I'll link back and forth to those as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure being here.
Cool, man. Good catching up with you. Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.